Hey, good morning, everybody. I see the numbers are still climbing. We'll give it another couple of seconds here to see when we level off and then get started. So let's just go till one after maybe, and then we'll kick things off. All right, looks like we're still climbing, but we're one after, so we'll get started. This will be recorded and posted along with the slide deck, so feel free to go back and re-engage if you show up a little bit late, not a problem. By way of introduction, Chase Eiserman with the Outpost, career contracting guy with the Air Force, just completed 21 years of service. Excited to be with the Outpost and continue what I was doing with AFWERX for the last 4 years, working with small businesses, getting them into the Fed business world. And then specifically for this conversation, the last 6 months of my career, I spent running the STRATFI Unpacked program. So that's what we're going to dive into today. By way of rules of engagement, I have the Q&A section open. If you could put your questions there. If it's pertinent to what we're talking about in the moment, I will absolutely answer that live. And then I'll save plenty of time at the end so that we can get to all the questions. And frankly, I'm happy to stay on as long as we need to get all those answered. So again, the topic for today is getting after a solid understanding of the STRATFI program, the strategic funds increase that AFWERX has on the street right now. The notice of opportunity is live, closing on 3 October of this year. And then interestingly enough, on the space side, SpaceWorks, their STRATFI is going to remain open until they run out of money. So happy to answer any questions on that as well. This is a snapshot of what we've done over the last couple of years. The big takeaway for this slide is that we're at an 85% win rate on the Outpost side. We have a good plan strategy of how to get after these submissions, lots of good connections and networking for collaboration agreement signature authorities, key end users, and then finding the funding, most importantly. All right. So for those that are new to the STRATFI program and what it does, we're looking at between 3 million and 15 million in SBIR funds to be allocated over a total of 48 months. You don't have to use them all, but you can. So again, that's anywhere on that scale from 3 million to $15 million. The point here is to get you beyond phase 2 and get into the palm effectively so that you can transition your capability after the STRATFI execution. So asking for $1 today that you need in 4 years, this is the opportunity to bridge that very familiar valley of death. Also, through the STRATFI process, you're working with potentially one customer and then 2 or 3 end users potentially throughout the development process. As you're consuming those R&D funds to accelerate your technology, you're building a robust BD strategy, going outside of service potentially for who's on your STRATFI collaboration agreement and starting to make those inroads for a phase 3 activity post STRATFI. And then, of course, finding the funds in the out years, getting that into congressional inserts or advocating in different commands for those funds to come through in initial distribution. All that to say, while we're going through the STRATFI executions, assuming a win with an award sometime in May, June of next year of calendar year 26, we're actively pursuing phase 3 activities, right? Those can go in concert and in parallel to your development activity, assuming you have something that's commercially available and ready for consumption. In terms of funding, the terminology here, defense only and dual use, is specifically in this use case focused on the funding mix, your ratio mix. So on the defense only side, we're looking at 2 parts government to 1 part SBIR. So on the low end, we're looking at $3 million in SBIR allocation over 48 months to $6 million matched by the government, all the way up to that 15 million and 30 million mark. And then conversely, on the dual use side, 2 parts private investment, so through your corporate raise, and then 1 part government and 1 part SBIR. This specific funding mix is completely up to you from a company perspective on how you want to initiate that relationship with your government partner and what you want to ask for. Also, a significant emotional event for the company, right? Are you in a position to make a raise, to not dilute yourself too much? So, lots of quality discussion needs to happen on how you want to attack the funding posture. For eligibility criteria, the principal one to get you in the door is your phase two. Two pieces to this eligibility criteria for starters on your phase two. If it's newly awarded, for example, the ones that were just selected not too long ago, the phase two has to have had 90 days of performance executed on it prior to your date of submission. So you would need to get, let's assume you submit on 3 October, back that up 90 days uh, for your contract award effectively on your phase two. So 90 days of performance on your phase two completed before you hit submit into the STRATFI program portal. You is pejorative. The government has to lead that submission effort. And then on the other side of the spectrum for your phase two eligibility, it has to have been completed within 2 years from the date of your submission. So completion is the end of the contract, the last payment and deliverable being made. And then it's 2 years backed up from your date of submission. So anywhere in the window between August and October 3rd of this year, and then back that up 2 years. So phase two is your initial entrance into the STRATFI eligibility pool. Second is you still have to be a small business. So meeting those size standards from the SBA. It's not NASIC, NAICS code specific, it's SBA, so less than 500 employees. Also keep in mind in the STRATFI program, if at any time during the performance of your STRATFI you believe that you will outgrow that 500 employees, you are no longer eligible, even on an awarded and active STRATFI, to receive SBIR dollars. So let's say that you're awarded your STRATFI in 26 and it going into 28, you've now exceeded 500 employees. The contract itself can still move forward with the non-SBIR government matching dollars or any other funds that you find through the time of execution, but SBIR dollars can no longer be applied. So as you're thinking about applying to this program, think about also your corporate growth. And if you think you're going to exceed those 500 employees, and have a time horizon for that so that you can shorten your period of performance to secure all those dollars. Another point of contention for that was just established is that a company can only receive one STRATFI in its lifetime. So if you've been previously awarded a STRATFI, then you're no longer eligible to come through on the STRATFI effort. And then just anecdotally, some companies have been notified about their TACFI selection, which is awesome. Congratulations. If you're using the phase two that you use to apply for that TACFI in order to be eligible for the STRATFI notice of opportunity that's open right now, keep in mind that TACFI must be executed as a modification against that phase two. If it's awarded as a sequential, a new contract, then that phase two is no longer eligible for a follow-on sequential contract, meaning STRATFI. So you would have to have another phase two that meets the eligibility criteria of 90 days of performance or concluded within 2 years prior to submission. All right. As I discussed, so STRATFI is open right now, open in August. For the AIR side, the AFWERX side, that notice of opportunity is going to close on 3 October at 12 Eastern. Midday. So we have to have everything into the government in the next couple of weeks. And then the government POC has to hit the final submit button by noon on the 3rd of October for an Air Force specific STRATFI application. For this round of notice of opportunity, the SpaceWorks side, so space specific STRATFI applications, that window is going to remain open until they run out of money. So in terms of when they will run out of money, that remains to be seen. But what I can tell you is they will do a continuous review process. So first in will get reviewed. If it meets the intent of a strategic need for the Space Force and has enough support on the space side, it will receive funding. And then they will move on to the next and so on down the line until they run out of money. So the key there is to get it in early. A fully robust and developed submission package as early as possible to make sure you don't hit after they run out of funds. Application requirements. A lot of the documentation has been condensed for this cycle, so fewer required documents. And they also have the app ingest checklist that you can walk down with the government POC to make sure that everything is in hand. Principally is the company information. Most importantly is the phase two, specifically the award date and the conclusion date, so that the initial review team can check for eligibility. Of course, your overview of what you're going to propose under the STRATFI is the most significant in terms of gaining traction and getting support from your government customer and end user. And more importantly, telling a very important story to the review team on the strategic need of the Air Force or Space Force that your effort or offering is going to meet. Your SBC approval, being less than 500 employees, milestone spend plan, and non-proprietary work plan. Those are similar to what we've seen over the last couple of years. Your matching funds letters, keep in mind as you're going through this process, whether it's this year or next, those letters of intent, the required funds don't have to hit your bank account until after selection, and then as we move towards contract award. So these are notices of intent or letters of intent informing the government that from a private funds investing perspective, those entities will invest, assuming a selection. And the government's the same way, right? These are letters of intent from a government entity that says, if selected, we will employ funds. And most importantly, from a government interaction perspective, as you're building your package for submission, the funds for execution aren't required until that award date. So we're talking the May, June timeframe of 2026 on the air side as we follow through that pattern for award selection and selection notification, and then follow on contract award. Collaboration agreement. Make sure you follow the guidance in that documentation on the collaboration agreement on what is required specifically for the customer signature authority. So GS15 or 06 equivalent representing a PEO or equivalent level. So thinking MAGCOM center or an actual PEO. Without that appropriate signature authority, the submission will not be considered. Lastly, for this cycle, the finance MOU has been removed, which is good news. One less piece of documentation to get submitted, but the contracting MOU is still there, meaning the customer or end user has to bring the contracting support along for this, and the contracting POC has to sign that document. If it's not signed and submitted with the submission, it will not be considered as complete and will be rejected at initial review. For those that don't know, for this program, as opposed to open topic, phase one or phase two, direct to phase two execution, which is done by AFWERX, all of the contracting activity for STRATFI and TACFI is done external to AFWERX, and is POC is required to sign acknowledging the workload is inbound. All right, common mistakes. This is covered in the AFWERX AMAs as well. So straight from there. First and foremost is missing elements of the capability package. So as you go down the ingest checklist, any of those things that are missing are going to get immediately flagged in the initial review and have the submission be rejected. Now, if you get it in early enough before October 3rd at noon, the initial review team may offer feedback and then give you an opportunity, you in concert with the government POC, to correct any of those missing elements. But it has to be done with enough time for the team to respond to you. So keep that in mind. So as we move closer and closer to 3 October, we have to be super diligent about making sure that everything on that ingest checklist is completed. What we just talked about, incorrect POCs or signature authorities, again, it's laid out in the collaboration agreement exactly what is required. That GS15 or 06 equivalent for both the Department of the Air Force end user as specified in the collaboration agreement, and then that customer representing a PEO. Inaccurate matching funds. I see a lot of questions come in, especially in the AMAs, about phase 3 eligibility or private matching guidance. please take time to review the matching funds guidance that's out there in the Ask Me Anything section on AFWERX.com. I'm also happy to take those questions and answer them if you have any as we go through this discussion. But that is imperative, right? The point of the program is to have those matching dollars. If they aren't eligible to go into the matching pool, then again, the submission will be rejected. So start looking at that as early as possible. If you're shooting for through October, it's got to be right now. And then for phase three specifically, the requirement on that for matching is phase three execution within 6 months of your submission date. And that's the executed dollars. So if you have a purchase order for $5 million for 100 of your widgets, then it has to be, that contract has to have been awarded within 6 months of that submission date. Now, moving past submission date, if you have anticipatory execution that you see, that can also go on a funds matching document that entity, unit X is going to put $5 million on contract in FY26. Again, that's that letter of intent, also eligible as you move forward. Milestones and funds alignment, just make sure that everything that you put in that milestone task list, the funding match aligned to it, those matches equal and total at the bottom. So again, if we're on dual use, we're looking at SBIR dollars totaling the right amount, government matching dollars in the right ratio amount, and then your private matching on the far right, also meeting that funds matching amount. Contracting acceptance is absolutely imperative, and it has to be signed by a contracting officer, a random representative, not of the contracting office, squadron, or entity that will be taking on the work will get flagged in initial review. So make sure it's an actual contracting POC signing there. And then lastly, they have it on here. Ensure that the documentation you're using is what's currently out there in the 26.1 with all the appropriate headers. So for those that aren't government that are joining us right now, you have to lean into a government POC. They can go into the government facing Teams channel to recover those documents and then share them with you. We also have the documents and can share them with you as well. But again, it has to be the current version or it will be rejected. So I left this chart in here. It's antiquated now from an operational imperatives perspective. They don't use this terminology before, but it still tells the same story, right? The whole point that you have to make in the submission, specifically the collaboration agreement, is telling what strategic need you're filling for either the Air Force or Space Force through the research and development you will apply to your technology to a warfighter outcome. So these are some old specifics for operational imperatives. You can look at OSD R&E for their latest initiatives they put out, executive orders. I mean, the list goes on of where you can source operational imperative-esque type things. But that's really the point of this chart, is to really hammer home the fact that in order to get a positive review and hopefully a selection, we have to tell that compelling story about what strategic imperative the technology is actually going to answer when it's successful. And we never describe if successful in any of these documents. We always describe success and then the outcome that will be delivered to the warfighter on the back end. Just for your awareness, these are the current program executive offices. As I understand, things are changing. There's the AFMC realignment that I don't know is done yet. I know some offices are collapsing, some offices are combining. So this is all subject to change. But in terms of a customer signature authority, here's one opportunity that we're looking at specific to the PEOs. Centers also qualify, and then we have the space PEOs as well. Herschel asks, are things like ACE, Agile Combat Employment, considered operational imperatives? I would say certainly, Herschel, depending on who your customer is. So when we think ACE, that's at the tactical level for the most part. So the specific application of your technology as we move back from tactical to strategic, Does it fit under a center, and can it lay into an A staff to be, either a program equivalent or actually back within AFMC? So certainly that can be the story we tell in the collaboration agreement documentation, but we have to tell it in such a way that it impacts ACE, but it'll be caught at a program level by PEOX or A4, A58 at AFMC or AFIMSC, something to that effect. So we have to tell that higher level implication specifically that ties back into your transition strategy, because you need to identify where those out year dollars are going to come at scale. From an ACE employment perspective, potentially at the wing, you're not going to have large dollars, but as a capability at the center, MAGCOM, or PEO level, that's the story we have to tell. Does the customer signature need to be PEO level? Yes, that is exactly what the collaboration agreement says, Nicole. It says for customer, O6 or GS15 level equivalent representing a PEO office or PEO equivalent, which the centers and MAGCOMs also meet that intent. So winning strategies, number one, talk specifically to Nicole, what your question was. You have to have the appropriate engagement at the appropriate level with the appropriate office and get that signature. That is the single most imperative thing beyond the money that needs to come through on the matching side. And then number two, let the data speak for itself. What you want from your collaboration agreement, your milestone spend plan, and your non-proprietary work plan is to have all the questions answered that you can possibly think of without someone having to reach back out to you, because they won't. So in real terms, for evaluation, from an evaluation perspective, the AFWERX team does an initial review, and then from a technical evaluation perspective, they will reach out into the bank of SMEs that are out either within AFRO or the MAGCOM centers, anyone that volunteers. 3 independent reviews will come back on that. But you have to assume, especially if your technology is incredibly novel, that the person reviewing it needs all the information in clear-eyed description that they can get, so that they're not guessing. I have seen in the past where things have not been pushed forward because from a government perspective, they didn't, the SME specifically didn't think that something was achievable, or that the company or the government POC in concert with the company wasn't asking for enough money, or they didn't believe, the SME didn't believe that there was enough money even available in the program to get something off the ground. So make sure that everything you're describing in concert with the funding that you're requesting is achievable, and you can describe that achievability over time so that you're telling a compelling story on the technical side for what you can actually get done. Another thing to consider is, so everybody wants to shoot for 15 million. I absolutely get it. Everybody wants to max it out. But the counterpoint to that is that means the government has to match that out. And frankly, you do, or max that out. And frankly, you do too. So can we fit somewhere maybe short of 15 million to make it more palatable from a government matching perspective, and still achieve an outcome that delivers something at the end of the 4 years, is something to take into consideration, because there's also a huge benefit to just having the contractual vehicle in place for the 4 years. Because again, where we started, right, we're going to do BD while we're doing the development, assuming we have a commercial application out there. Maybe we're doing a specific technical approach for a particular PEO or customer. If we have the vehicle, we can, the government, assuming the contracting officer is good with it, can always expand scope and consume more money. The non-SBIR dollars, the SBIR dollars will never go up from what we initially asked for. But if we have a contract vehicle in place, as many companies know, that's one of the first questions you get. How can I spend the money without having to actually spend it myself? Well, if we have this contract vehicle, maybe it's a lower dollar initially, but we have it for 4 to 5 years potentially, if we work through the CO to consume some of those other dollars and add some consumables off the back end of the in parallel to the STRATFI effort. And then really understand who owns the budget, right? So in order to get those letters of intent specifically from the government, we've done a deep dive on the Outpost side to the big beautiful bill to see where the money is going to land in 26. Where is it earmarked? Where is it going? How do we get in front of that and make those proactive requests from our customer and end users in order to get that put on a notice of or a letter of intent for our submission, and more importantly, for it to actually land in the out years. Another question I get a lot of the time is, hey, if those funds don't show up, what happens to the contract? Let's say in 26, you do get your non-government, non-SBIR dollar match, and the SBIR obviously comes through as well. That contract gets awarded. And then in year 2, some fiscal issues come up, and those non-SBIR government matching dollars don't actually come through. The contract itself can still exist potentially, but the SBIR dollars won't match against it. So you could source from another place or figure out other options in terms of how to fund or source off of that contract. But the contract itself has to have the match in place at all times. So if those out year funds don't come through, then the contract will simply conclude unless we find money from another pot. All right, in terms of what you can anticipate, and this is specific to the 3 October close date on the air side. Again, I don't know what the space side will look like in terms of their timeline to selection or non-selection notification based on their open notice of opportunity. But initial review will be completed within a couple of days whenever you hit submit, right? So if it's now or anytime, a couple of days before 3 October, initial review will take a couple of days. They will either come back to you with some feedback on what's missing or needs to be corrected, or if it's too late in the submission cycle, you won't hear that. And then initial review, if they catch anything, will simply send a non-select notification. Once initial review is through, and this is simply the check of the ingest portal, right? Did they submit everything? Do they have all the matching funds in place that are required? The signatures are correct. The contracting acceptance of responsibility is in there, all that stuff. So no tech review. This is just, did they get everything in that was required? Then it goes to functional review. Again, that's those SMEs inside AFRL or anywhere in the Rolodex that is as closely aligned to your technology as we can get. Those reviews conclude. They come back with a recommendation, an individual recommendation from those SMEs. That, in concert with some of the strategic level offices on both the air side and the space side, have also leaned in to review. Does it actually meet a strategic intent? And is the Air Force interested? Once all of that data is put together, these are not comparisons between other submissions. These are individual evaluations on the submission itself. That will go up to a board. For STRATFI, it's beyond AFRL, but I don't know if it's in the Pentagon this time around. I know there's some churn on how they're going to get to that, but then the board review comes out and they make their selections based on the budget that they have. Keep in mind that the budget, it varies over time. If you saw through the TACFI, that first window, we had a bunch of selections. In the second window, we had very few because it was a limited budget. The same budget pool that AFWERX is pulling to fund the selections from this cycle also has to pay must-pays from previous cycles. And we need enough budget in the 2-year budget allocation to have another cycle in the future. So I can't tell you unequivocally how much money they actually have dedicated to this cycle. So just keep in mind, it's probably going to be pretty competitive just based on the dollar at scale that we're talking about here. Yeah, and then the SBA review, this is simply if it's going to be a new contract award, this is the SBA signing off saying, hey, we do approve the beyond 2.5 max for SBIR phase 2 to get you up on contract. Then stakeholder execution, this is when you get kicked over, the selection notification then goes out to everybody that's listed in the collaboration agreement, specifically the contracting officer, and the company is also notified. At this point, we get into the contract execution process. So, uh, up to 120 days post selection notification for contract award now, as opposed to 90 in previous cycles. First 30 days is the RFP development. The great thing about that is everything that was submitted can be crafted very quickly into a letter RFP and sent back out to the company. The company then generates their proposal. Again, everything you've already done, you have the pricing, everything allocated from your previous documentation. You just need to answer it in the format the contracting officer is looking for. And then within 120 days, AFWERX will issue the funds over to the contracting office and they will execute the contract and get it kicked off. So that's, from initial review, presumably starting on 3 October, selection notifications, step 5 coming out probably in the early part of next year. So again, we're looking at that May, June timeframe for contract awards for 26.1 cycle. All right, so just a couple other notes that I didn't put on here. Well, actually, let me look at the questions real quick. I see Aaron popped up a while ago. Can matching dollars come before a STRATFI or award? If so, is there a window ahead of proposal or award that we need to be mindful of? So, Aaron, two parts. So, matching for phase 3, again, that's that 6-month window prior to your submission date. So, if you hit submit on 3 October, then any phase 3 matching dollars have to be on contract within 6 months from that submission date. If you're talking private matching, there isn't necessarily a time horizon on that, how far back you can back it up. It's really about what you describe in terms of why you did the raise. Was the raise specifically in anticipation of submitting to the program? And if that's something you had to build over 2 years, that's perfectly fine, and you can describe that effectively in the letter of intent documentation that is signed off by the investor, um, to show that they did in fact invest on X date. You can put the fiscal year on there, and that their intent was to fund with the intent of application to STRATFI. So again, phase 3 has to be within 6 months of your submission date, and then there's really not a horizon for private investment. And then anonymous, does the '06 level at the MAGCOM need to be their actual director or deputy director, or can it be an '06 at a lower position, such as the division level? So the collaboration agreement doesn't describe the actual position level. It just says '06 or GF15 equivalent representing a PEO. So the short answer is it can be at a lower level. It's the organizational structure that AFWERX will look back at. So if they're on the periphery of a PEO or something like that, or claiming to speak on behalf of, and AFWERX traces that command structure line, then it won't be eligible. But yes, if they sit directly in the path of the 1-star PEO, then yes, they are eligible to sign. Herschel, the funds the units would provide are R&D color funding, correct? So if you mean by units, specifically talking about if we're on our matching fund slide here, so talking about the private government dollars, the majority of the dollars that come in are non-R&D. They'll be O&M funds, 1-year dollars. Most organizations do not have access to R&D funds outside of, like, AFSOC has some, AFRL certainly does. So it could be R&D funds, but the preponderance of entities that fund inside the STRATFI program are bringing O&M dollars. And then certainly the SBIR dollars are going to be 2-year R&D funds. All right, Nicole, can you submit to STRATFI if you plan to subcontract to a prime large defense? You can, but 51% of the work has to be performed by the small business that is submitting. So just keep that in mind that the work distribution has to be at minimum that 51%. Yeah, Herschel, I just went over this again, but I'll hit it one more time. What does it mean that phase three has to be within 6 months of selection date? Can you please explain that? So, again, that terminology, it's not selection date, it is submission date. So, again, if you're submitting on 3 October, you being the government POC on your behalf is submitting on 3 October, the funds applied to the phase three must have gone on contract within 6 months prior to that submission date. And then moving forward, again, if you have a presumptive phase three in and out year, that can be put on as a letter of intent, the solicitation number or contract number as proposed, and then that can apply as matching funds in the future as well. All right, Aaron, does the color of money matter for the government match, or are all colors of the rainbow eligible? So, from an AFWERX perspective, all colors of the rainbow are acceptable as long as they are government dollars. From a contracting officer perspective, the application of those funds throughout the life of the contract becomes a bit more nuanced, right? So, R&D, silver dollars, totally understand that, right? It goes towards the research and development specifically for that use case. On the O&M side, the contracting officer is more than likely, in concert with the FM, going to require it to be applied to capital investment, hiring, purchasing materials, things like that. So it'll have to be called out specifically for its use across the task list or whatever is developed in the RFP to come back for proposal. So from an AFWERX perspective, nope, as long as the money is not SBIR and it's at the correct ratio to match, they're agnostic on the color. But when it comes to the contract execution, non R&D will have to be applied in a specific way across that contract execution. All right, I see that there's chat up, but I don't know. See, do we have questions there as well? So Austin put the private fund minimum would be 6 million private, 3 million from Gov, and 6 million from SBIR. On the minimum end, yes, you are absolutely right. Yeah, Cameron, I can throw my email in the chat, or it's already in there. You guys have it. Caleb, question on eligibility. I have an AFWERX phase two, then we received an Army sequential phase two that does that prevent us from applying for a sequential? So I'm assuming with the Army catalyst. So yes, if you that specific phase two contract number, if it's called out in your Army contract award and it's a brand new contract number associated to the Army phase two, then yes, your AFWERX phase two is now no longer eligible for a sequential award. But Caleb, I'm happy to have that conversation with you more specifically if you want to look at contract numbers and really dig into it. Let's see, Stephen, is the program still focused on legacy priorities despite administration change? Any interim guidance with language we should consider incorporating into the proposals? So I would really look at so on the air side, where are we focused? You have the executive orders around UAS, small group 1, 2, and 3, attritable drones. Obviously, there's money there. So if you're in that business, you're in a perfect place to get started. AI, of course, but I would tell you from an AI perspective, it needs to be hyper specific on the utility of that AI to a specific outcome. The program itself has, from an AFWERX perspective, has really moved away from just the overarching terminology of AI, and now they're breaking it down to get to that more strategic imperative level. So if you're an AI, be specific about the application. Anything PACAF related, of course, thinking to the future, potentially UCOM things. This is always the biggest thing, even being internal to AFWERX, that often wondered and never got guidance on, because you have the OSD R&E critical technology areas. We see the executive orders, but even within the service itself, MAGCOM centers and PEOs, they have their own priorities and directives. That's really where that relationship building comes into effect. So I wouldn't focus on legacy priorities. I don't think that's key now either, especially because from StratFi perspective, last year, Honorable Hunter was the one that signed off and kind of set the priorities for the StratFi submission selections. Uh, this year, I don't know where that authority lies on who's going to actually make the selections. So I would pick your best fit and run with it. And it really, what's going to guide you ultimately is where the money is for the matching dollars and what that entity is really interested in from a strategy and strategic perspective. Cameron, we were recently denied on our TACFI. Will the loss on TACFI affect our StratFi submission? Also, is there a way to get feedback on why our submission was not accepted? Uh, so, Cameron, I don't know if you're government or private, but the government can reach out and ask for feedback on the TACFI. Um, Often it is very vague in the response, and that's because this isn't a actual source selection under a solicitation, so the requirement isn't there to provide that feedback. But the government POC that you worked with can absolutely reach out and see if they can get anything back. But more importantly, to your first question, no, any prior submission is not taken into account in terms of your StratFi application. It's wholly itself and is evaluated as such. Um, so no concerns from a StratFi wasn't selected on this up to or I'm sorry, the TACFI wasn't selected as you get ready to apply for StratFi. And more importantly, that's because on the TACFI side, it could be for a bevy of reasons, right? Super interesting tech. Everybody was excited, but just in the allocation of funds, it just didn't hit high enough. Um, or something else could be part of that feedback. So absolutely have the government POC ask for feedback, see what comes back, but don't let that be the TACFI not being picked up. Don't let that be the reason you don't submit for StratFi. The government funding means, say, AFRL side willing to allocate a budget. Not entirely sure what that question means. The gov funding means AFRL side willing to allocate budget. So on the from the SBIR perspective, technically AFWERX is at least right now, a two-letter within AFRL, but they're specifically allocating the funds on behalf of the SBIR program. So don't associate SBIR dollars with AFRL necessarily. From a government matching perspective, if AFRL is a potential end user or want to be a matching partner, they absolutely can be considered for government matching dollars. In ZHU, sorry, I don't know how to pronounce that. If you have more specifics, I'm happy to go into more detail. Referring okay. What do we have? Aaron, does the match have to come from you, USAF, or are all government customers eligible? Yeah. So the only thing that is required to come from the USAF through this process is the principal end user must be, if you're going on the air side for an application as opposed to the space side, the principal end user must be from the Department of the Air Force. So for money, it can come from anyone in the federal government that wants to partner on building up the non-SBIR government matching dollars. So yes, funds can come from outside sources other than the Air Force. Mark, can you explain the TACFI modification again for StratFi eligibility? Absolutely. So there's two ways to award either a StratFi or a TACFI contract. One is a modification to the existing phase two to consume the TACFI uh, workload and funding. To do that, let's say, for example, your phase two was an open topic awarded by AFWERX, and you still have ample period of performance left on that contract. Then the gaining contracting officer that you identified in your TAC5 submission can send a request to AFWERX to have that contract transferred to them for administration. And then they can go through the same process, issue a letter RFP, get your proposal back, and then modify that that phase two to consume the TAC5 requirements and the funding. That's called a phase 2B modification. In that scenario, that modification maintains your phase two eligibility for future activity, in this case, STRATFI. So again, that TACFI has to be executed via a phase 2B modification against the existing phase two that you used for eligibility. Alternatively to that, if your TACFI is awarded against that phase two as a sequential, as we talked about earlier, a brand new contract award, a phase two can only get one sequential in its lifetime. That phase two will no longer be eligible. So it has to be executed via that modification phase 2B in order to maintain your phase two's eligibility to get to STRATFI. And Mark, if you have any more questions on that, let me know. Aaron, does private include commercial product orders? You'll have to look back at the funds matching guidance. Don't believe that promissory notes for future orders count, specifically because you don't have the money yet. Part of the requirement for the matching dollars is that for the private funds, at time of contract award, so the guidance says any dollars that you're going to account for as private matching have to be in your bank account within 45 days after the submission date to account for the first 2 years of the STRATFI. Now, I haven't really seen that enforced, but it's in the guidance, so be aware. What matters is the first 2 years of private matching dollars have to be in your bank account, and you will have to just offer a bank statement to the contracting officer as part of your proposal response to the RFP. So pre-sales don't count unless the dollars are in the bank account. Do past phase three procurements count against the match for Herschel? Again, they only count against the match if the phase three contract is executed within 6 months prior to the submission date. Again, if we're talking about October 3rd, the last day to submit, back that up 6 months, the phase three has to be executed within that time. So anything before that 6 months would not count. Stephen, I will defer to Carrie about the slides, but I don't see why not. And the recording will be loaded up as well. All right, I think I've gotten through all the questions so far. Just got about 12 minutes left. So a couple things to think about. I know the window is tight right now, thinking about phase or STRATFI submission by October 3rd. So the key litmus test for me right now, if you're still considering getting in and building the submission, is what is your eligibility date cutoff for your phase two? So again, thinking back, you're eligible up until 2 years past your phase two completion date to submit to that submission date, right? So if you're right on the edge, all you know, what's the cliche? You don't get any hits for the swings you don't take, right? So if your phase two eligibility is about to expire, take a shot. Let's get in and try to get something submitted that's compelling, that has an opportunity to get selected. If you're just in that cohort of the phase twos that just got awarded, then now is the time to start building towards next year, submitting for STRATFI, right? Building the relationships with investors, building relationships with government customers and end users, getting in front of PEOs now to build for a budget for the future submission. So looking at 27 for execution. Uh, Now is the time to start getting that groundwork done. So really think about that. If your phase two eligibility is about to expire, get in the game. Let's try to get something submitted. And then conversely, if you're just getting your eligibility in place, you don't have that 90 days of performance, so not eligible for this notice of opportunity cycle, then let's start building the bridge and the package to get to the next cycle. Also in the background is reauthorization, the $75 million potential cap for companies in a lifetime, what AFWERX itself is going to look like next year after the reorganization. And with the new SBA administration in place, what does the STRATFI and TACFI program writ large look like moving forward? So there's a lot of reasons to go now that may not uh, fit necessarily in the corporate decision matrix, but there's other significant factors that are also laying in right now as well. So just keep that in mind. And again, if you guys have questions, you guys have my email now. Happy to have those one-on-ones and really talk about the strategy and what's in the realm of possible. The other thing to talk about, and we spoke about it earlier in terms of the dollar amounts. Where's my chart? So again, we're talking about 3 to 15 million, and absolutely max it out if you can. You have the appropriate matching dollars from both the government and your private raise, but there is value in scoping to that lower level to get the contract. I'm not saying that lower dollars are more competitive or looked at in a different way. I'm just saying if the alternative is you want to max but you can't get the matching dollars, uh, take a swing at a lower dollar amount so that we have the contracting vehicle in place moving forward. So just as your corporate decision is coming along, really think about that dollar on the continuum and what's in the realm of possible for the matching, vice just trying to max it out because that's what's offered and available. Also, through this process, remember that as written today, the Civil Policy Directive is hyper focused on commercialization. The word transition is never used in the Civil Policy Directive. This is about expanding your capabilities in the commercial marketplace. So, if you have the opportunity to go into the commercial setting and get sales and start building relationships, not just commercially, but commercial sales back to the government, we can do that all in parallel to this effort. Look at those for phase three matching in future years. You're also building your BD pipeline and you're looking at other funding opportunities for post-SBIR for at scale and maybe that program level. So don't ever let this effort overtake your commercial application and your ability to get sales moving right now. And then we kind of talked about it earlier with the timing of the raise. Have you done a raise? Are you going to do a raise? Make the raise an inflection point for the STRATFI submission and opportunity. I know right now is tight with just over a month and a week to get things together. But if you've done a raise, use it as eligibility now. Because again, I don't have finite guidance on the time horizon for a raise. Backing it up a certain amount of time, is it still eligible? Can we tell a compelling story? And if you have it now, is it worth taking that swing moving forward? Especially if the investment itself isn't tied to the application, you already have the funds. Might as well get something built and submitted and tell a compelling reason why the government should pick you. So I think I have answered everything in both the chat and in the Q&A. We've got about 5 minutes left. I am happy to hang on and answer any more questions that might come up. I'll leave this chart up here for a second. That's my email address and cell phone number. Happy to talk to any or all of you if you have more questions. And absolutely, we want to work with anybody that's ready to get started, either for this cycle, and we can run and sprint with you, or get something, a deliberate game plan in place moving towards a submission for next year. I tell you, one of the great things about the team I work with is StratFi is interesting, incredibly relevant for the dollars of scale that it offers. But the BD strategy and the real go to market strategy that we develop is just beyond SBIR for reference. So, phase three is a term we kick around a lot, and we examine those opportunities outside of SAM, in SAM, what's on the street, pre-solicitations, engaging early, and doing all those things. So, absolutely happy to help get your StratFi off the ground and submitted. Happy to build that BD strategy moving forward into next year in a submission package. Uh, together as early in finding the dollars to match against that from a government matching perspective. But more importantly, what does the future look like 5 years from now, including the StratFi? So, standing by for questions, comments, uh, anything that we can do to assist. I'm happy to take a call morning, noon, and night. Uh, Again, if you're pushing towards 3 October, standing by to assist. And if we don't hear from you, absolutely all the best of luck in the world and wish you huge wins in the future. And then, Paul, I appreciate it. I love being retired. All right, I will hang on and just wait these last couple of minutes. What do we got? 4 minutes left. Any questions, thoughts, anything you need, I'm here. If not, hopefully we'll talk to you soon. And then share the recording on the back end. It'll be out there for anybody that wants to take a look. Thank you guys very much. All right, Kara, I think we're winding down here. I think we're good to go.